how are your officers finding it? Are they finding it difficult to kind of enforce these guidelines when there is such a lack of clarity?
Today, some of our Make Good Trouble team members are speaking to Sussex Police about continuing the lockdown guidelines. So we have some questions here. So let's start with Gemma's first question.
So Roisin, my first question is, obviously there's not what you could say in terms of government guidelines, maybe they're not as clear as they maybe should be. I guess my question in that is, how are your officers finding it? Are they finding it difficult to kind of enforce these guidelines when there is such a lack of clarity?
So I know I had a really good think about that, and actually I think before you even think about the guidelines, I think the most difficult thing is we quite simply never expected to join the police and one day tell everyone en masse go home. Like, you're not welcome in our beautiful county. You can't hang out on our lovely beaches. You can't meet your mates on the downs. So I think that is kind of difficulty number one. Really, is it's just like this massive shock to the system for us. And then the other thing is, a bit like you, we sit in front of the telly on Sunday night and wait for Boris to speak, and we hear it at exactly the same time as you do. And people don't believe us when we say that. So my colleagues on the street, I gave a few people a call on Monday to say, you know, how does it look now on Monday? And they said, people don't believe us. People think we know more than we're telling them we know. And so how that helps us is we're able to be really empathetic. Go, do you know what? If we're only just finding this out, we're only just figuring out exactly what it means. That means the person we're talking to is feeling in exactly the same way. So we can start the whole conversation with, it's really difficult, isn't it? Like, it's really confusing. We've made of the rules so far is that this thing you're doing probably isn't okay. And then that person can come back and have a conversation. And by the end of that conversation, you hope that you've encouraged them to behave in a way that the rules allow. But actually remembering that the overarching principle isn't sticking to the rules. It's about trying to keep everyone safe and trying to do the right thing to protect the NHS's capacity. And so if we all know that we're aiming roughly for that, then I think we'll be all right, is how we feel.
Exactly. And I suppose the comfort in it is that we are all in the same situation, you know, we're all in the same boat in this.
And actually one analogy that I heard, just you saying we're all in the same boat, is someone, I don't know who said this, so I can't quote the person exactly, but they said something like, actually, we're all weathering the same storm, but in different boats. My colleagues are really appreciative of the fact that actually for some people, their boat's got a lot more holes in. And it's a much, much harder situation than for others who, you know, it's tough, but it's a lot easier to stick to the rules because, I don't know, their home life is less complicated, their family is less complicated, they've got more support around them, whatever it is. I think on the whole, most of us are pretty good at appreciating that.
Thank you.
So I mentioned earlier, obviously I'm in foster care, and also my foster parents are quite vulnerable to this disease, you could say more so than the rest because they've got underlying health conditions, etc. So my guidelines have been a lot stricter than what even the government are enforcing. So I was only allowed kind of half an hour out a day exercise. I haven't been going to the shop up until obviously yesterday and things, or well, today, now that the restrictions have been lifted a little bit. So it's been really difficult for me, especially as someone who's quite independent and, like you said, just the freedom to go out and do what I want when I want to do it. I know that maybe if the guidelines weren't as strict within my home, I may have been going out more. As at my age, that's what we do tend to do. We go and meet our friends and things like that. What's the most common responses that you're hearing from young people as to the reasons why they're out? Is it because they feel that they're kind of, is it prone to the disease? Is that the right term? So they don't feel they're going to get it, because obviously we're seeing most of the statistics showing that it is older people who do have underlying health conditions and things like that. Is that the response? If so, what's the best way that you're handling those situations and these groups if you are seeing groups of minors out and about?
I think you can roughly say there's about 3 different kind of reasons people give, and sometimes it's just purely they've misunderstood the rules, haven't realised that the thing they're doing at the time wasn't okay. Some of it's just about, like we chatted about earlier, about just purely being fed up at home, just want to get out. And then the last one is like what you said, people of a younger age simply feel like they're not going to get seriously ill, so why do they need to stick to the rules? And actually that's a really hard one, isn't it? Because I mean, it gets talked about in a lot of the daily briefings. The evidence is that if you're a younger person, you're highly unlikely to get seriously ill and need hospitalising. But for me, it goes back, and it's a bit repetitive, but it goes back to what I said last time I had a chat with Lola, it's not so, it's trying to encourage people to see it, that it's not so much about the impact on them, not even necessarily about the impact on the people they live with. It's that, well, they're now talking about the R, aren't they? Everyone knows what the R rate is. Everyone suddenly understands what a reproductive rate is. And it's that you don't want to be responsible for it being passed down the line and passed down the line and passed down the line. So it's difficult. It isn't like a clear cut, we have an answer to give. And people go, oh yeah, I get it. Off I go home again. When you have a conversation with people, sometimes it's the things that people aren't saying are actually the questions you've got to answer. And sometimes it's really trying to get to the bottom of people's understanding or misunderstanding, just finding the best way to communicate that message whilst being really sympathetic.
And at the same time, I guess, like with everything, you don't understand the entirety of a situation until you've maybe been through it yourself, or you know someone that's kind of had it, so you wouldn't understand the severity, obviously, unless it comes close to home. Sometimes it takes that to really take things seriously.
Yeah, as a young person that's had to be even more restricted, even though you're healthy, what would you say? How does it feel to you? What would you say to other people that are kind of flouting the rules a bit?
For someone who's, like I said, I'm always out and about. I'm someone who has as much freedom as I want because I don't kind of take advantage of that. It has been really difficult, but at the same time, I think the thing that's kept me going is that I'm doing it for the right reasons. We're doing it to support the NHS staff, to stop the R rate from going up and then not being able to handle it. I think the unknown, that we don't know what could happen if we are to do that, and just in the back of my mind thinking, am I the one that's adding to these total of deaths that's happening? I think that's what's kept me in, and obviously for the safety of my foster carers and things. But like I said, there's people out there that they just don't think it's going to happen to them, and that's what's there. They're just going out and they're getting on with their daily business. But the thing is, I say that, but I've also seen a lot of people my age via Snapchat, Instagram and things putting up very long-winded posts about how they think it's disrespectful. They've removed a lot of their friends off social media for seeing that they've been going out, because they're thinking, well, hang on a minute, I'm indoors and you think it's right to go. And there has been, I think, a lot of conflict between people, even who are close friends. I mean, I've had arguments with my friends who have been going out and saying, well, look, if you want to see me when this is all over, I don't want to put any of my family at risk. And if I know you've been out mixing with other people, and then I just can't see you. So it's just, and obviously now that we're allowed to mix with one person, it's difficult, because then it's like, well, how do I know who you've been seeing, and that you're going to then kind of bring that risk up into my family. So it is all really confusing. But I do know that although there is some kind of youths and that taking it not as seriously, there are ones that are taking it seriously more than we think.
Yeah, and I think it's probably important not to stigmatise young people as if they're the category of people that are breaking rules, because there's absolutely no evidence that they are.
No,
so yeah,
exactly.
Whilst I think ought to be really aware of how this affects young people differently, and really reflect that in the way we engage with young people, it's not about stigmatising them as the problem.